How do the Wild and Blues match up in this first round playoff series? Which Blues players are the ones that could turn the tide? We look at that and more today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, folks, playoff time is here, and we are doing a crossover episode of Locked on Wild and Locked on Blues to get you ready for the playoff series everyone wants to see throughout the entirety of the NHL. Of course, I'm talking Wild Blues. Seth Topal, host of Locked on Wild, here with Josh Hyman, one of the hosts of Locked on Blues. And we're going to break down every angle that exists for what should be just a fantastic series between these two teams. Josh, we'll start with some of the Blues angles to look into in this series. The notes, as it were.
Classy.
The series. I know, I tried a little bit there. I want to ask you right off the bat, because this has been one of the things I think that I'm most curious about from a Wild perspective on the St. Louis Blues. How are you feeling heading into this series about the Blues goalie tandem of Jordan Binnington and Ville Husso?
I knew obviously that question's going to come up. It has to. It's a good problem to have, you know. I feel like there are a lot of times where you got like goalie controversies just because two goalies are playing poorly. The Blues kind of have the exact opposite, where Ville Husso has kind of come out of not nowhere, but been sort of a journeyman. He's 27, hasn't been consistently in NHL up until this point, and has come in and been at first a tremendous backup, and then when Jordan Binnington started to struggle, he came on as a really, really strong starter. And now all of a sudden, over the past like 2 weeks, Jordan Binnington has been like, "Hey, I won you guys a Stanley Cup. Remember me?" And he's playing really well as well. So it's like, on one hand, it's like, I would love to have 2019 Jordan Binnington, world beater, ridiculous save percentage, ridiculous goals allowed average. He's our guy, number one, ride or die through him. But on the other hand, it's like, Ville Husso will probably start game one, more than likely. But Jordan Binnington could start game 2 or game 3 or game 5 or second round. Like it's such a good problem to have, in the sense that, the Blues in the past have had this problem where they play really well in front of one goalie, and then really poorly in front of another. When they used to run like 1A, run B with Brian Elliott and Jake Allen, they would always treat one goalie way better than the other, just based on like whatever month it was. They haven't played like that this season. They've played consistently in front of whatever goaltender has been in between the pipes. So it gives me almost more confidence to know that, like, if Ville Husso just crumbles under the playoff pressure because he's never really been there, then you got a guy that won a Stanley Cup, or vice versa. If Jordan Binnington really doesn't have it, they give him a shot at some point. Well, Ville Husso's had a tremendous year as a starter. So I'm confident. I like that we have two really good goalies heading into the playoffs.
One of the big storylines heading into the season was the status of Vlad Tarasenko, who looked like wanted to kind of get out of St. Louis. Just wasn't happy with the situation, but that has flipped considerably.
Yeah,
played the entire season. Seems like he has become an integral part of that team. Just how much of a transformation have we seen from Tarasenko this season to go from a guy who was, it seemed like, on the outside looking in, to now being one of the focal points of a very good, very deep Blues team?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Not only is he a guy that, had that public trade request over the summer, but he's also a guy that had 3 shoulder surgeries in the last 2 years and change. He's a guy that many people, including myself, thought would never return to his former self. The shoulder's a finicky thing in hockey. It's hard to get, especially a guy like him that relies so much on his shot and his strength, that it was pretty reasonable to expect that, the prime Tarasenko was gone, because he's going to be playing at 80%, whatever. And we hadn't really seen him reach that form since he was having that shoulder trouble. So between the injury and the trade request, I think expectations were very low on Tarasenko at the start of the season. Just, come in, do your player role, do a good job, and don't cause locker room drama. And not only has he not done that, he is already pretty easily surpassed his career high in points. Going to be point per game over an 82 game pace. I think he had 82 going into the other game. I don't remember what his updated total is now, but 30 plus goals, tons of assists. Part of what I think has been the best line in hockey over the past few weeks, and him, Robert Thomas, and Pavel Buchnevich. It has been such a 180 from everyone's opinion on Vladimir Tarasenko heading into the season. Was like, oh God, this is going to be a nightmare. Fans are going to be booing him. He's going to create, drama in the locker room. No, he came in with a smile on his face, thanking the fans like he always does. And oh yeah, he's also our leading scorer.
One of the big things at the trade deadline, as with the Minnesota Wild, the Blues were obviously active as well, acquiring Nick Leddy. And I remember at the time, and I continue to kick myself for doing this, I just was kind of questioning whether or not it was enough for the Blues at the deadline, to be kind of that over-the-top impact move. It seems like that is when the Blues really took off and became just this absolute juggernaut. And so here I am eating my words, but just how big of a boost did that give the team to get Leddy into the lineup and really just take this team to the next level?
Oh, don't get me wrong. I was eating my words too. Both me and my co-host Tommy, we were both, because it was so hard. We've been talking about Jacob Chychrun in every episode for like 2 months leading up to the trade deadline. Hampus Lindholm, all these big names that we had, gone to bed dreaming about. Like, oh, what's the defensive pairings going to look like with Chychrun? We were spoiling ourselves. To then have that turn into Nick Leddy, like. At the time, it was underwhelming. It was like, damn, we really were going after all these big names and just settled for Nick Leddy. And also the return was a little hefty as well. It was like, wow, a second round pick and 2 roster guys for Nick Leddy. Not sure if that's gonna be what we need to push us over the edge. But then the flip side, like the little silver lining was, okay, but he has been playing on the Red Wings. He has been playing third pairing minutes. He was a really good defenseman a year ago. Maybe he can channel that. And then it seemed like it was just the last piece the Blues needed was someone who could just move the puck, break the puck out of their own zone to really complete their defensive scheme. Because the Blues defense was absolutely their Achilles heel for the majority of the season. And it still is the weakest part of the team. Obviously, it's not nearly as weak as it used to be. But all of a sudden, Nick Leddy comes in and the defense looks like a 6-man unit. It looks like they're all out there consistently playing the right way. And giving the Blues wins. And then when your offense is scoring 6 goals a game, the defense has a little bit less pressure on them to perform well on top of that. So it's like, yeah, as soon as Nick Leddy came on, it's like switch flipped. This team figured it out, and 16-game point streak just got snapped, unfortunately. But like best stretch of hockey of the season, all like you said, surrounding that Nick Leddy move.
Final one for you. I just want to ask, you've got Tarasenko, Thomas, Buchnevich, Kirill, Barbashev, Shen, Perron, Ryan O'Reilly just missed it. Brandon Saad had 24 goals. All guys with 20 goals for the Blues this season. Which one surprised you the most?
Ivan Barbashev. Absolutely. He was a kind of a career, bottom 6 guy, instrumental part in that cup run from a physicality standpoint. He was always a guy that was going to go out there and skate his butt off for the entirety of a shift, bang bodies down low, make the right play in the defensive zone. Never the most gifted defensive player, but his effort was always there. And he showed flashes on offense here and there, but never 25 goals or whatever the heck he's got this year. Came out of nowhere. Absolutely. And it's all the things that made him so successful, like that effort, that being that first guy to the puck that he would do in the defensive end. All of a sudden he's doing that in the offensive end and throwing great passes out front and just converting those dirty goals. Just it's an epitome of what made the Blues so successful this year. Is you got a guy like Ivan Barbashev scoring 20 plus goals on you. You got to worry about him on top of guys like Tarasenko and Thomas and Kirill and O'Reilly and all those guys. You're not necessarily going to be circling Ivan Barbashev in the lineup as an offensive threat, but now here he is, 25 goals this season.
A lot of names to try to stop, but the Wild are going to attempt to do that, and we'll talk about it at the end of the crossover. I don't get the sense that this is going to be a series like the one the Wild had against the Golden Knights last year, where it's really gritty, low-scoring hockey. I think both teams will be able to score some goals, and so it's going to come down to which team just scores more. We'll flip and we'll get to know the Minnesota Wild a little bit as we continue our crossover episode of Locked on Wild and Locked on Blues. The playoff primer continues after this. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NBA playoffs, Major League Baseball, and the Stanley Cup playoffs as well. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head over to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action and get yourself ready for the Kentucky Derby coming up this weekend. All that and more at BetOnline, where the game starts. Continuing our crossover episode of Locked on Wild and Locked on Blues, previewing the opening round playoff series between these two teams. Seth Topal joined by Josh Hyman of Locked on Blues. All right, my turn to get put in the question chair. Any questions you got? Any Wild-related questions? Hit me.
Yeah. Gotta start with the easy one. What's up with Marc-Andre Fleury?
It's so weird because you look at his overall record and still pretty good, but he has been on a string where in 3 of the last 4 starts, he's allowed at least 4 goals. And it seems like it's especially early, like against the Los Angeles Kings, 3 goals within the first 6 minutes of that game. Seattle Kraken, 2 goals within the first couple of minutes. And it seems like teams kind of can jump on him before he is ready. That's maybe the biggest difference between him and Cam Talbot, is that Talbot is much more even keeled, and he seems like he doesn't really get bothered by things going on early in the game. Whereas with Fleury, he is a little more, out of the net. He is a little more, he plays the puck a little more, as opposed to Talbot, who stays in net and just kind of lets things develop. And so from what I've seen of the goals that Fleury has given up, some of them have been some not so good positioning. He hasn't really been getting a whole lot of favors with the defense in front of him. But I think it just all is culminating to the fact that I think Cam Talbot will be your game 1 starter. That's at least the way that I would play it if I were the Wilds. Talbot has been the more consistent goalie throughout this stretch. Now, Fleury brings you the ability to steal a game when he's on his absolute best. And Cam Talbot's record against St. Louis this year, he's given up 10 goals in the last 2 starts against them. That's a concern for me as well. And if you back it up even to the Winter Classic, 6 goals allowed there, that's a concern. And so I just get the sense that Talbot is the more consistent performer. Fleury has the games where he's really, really good, and he has the games where he struggles. And so if I were to make the pick right now, I think I'd go Talbot, but it's not going to shock me at all. It sounds as though they're still not fully determined as to who's going to be the game 1 starter. It's not going to shock me if it's Fleury, but I think from a consistency standpoint, I would probably lean Talbot.
It's interesting that you mentioned Fleury being uncomfortable early, because one of the biggest success points for the Blues in that 2019 Cup run was they consistently scored really early in games, like first shot, second shot. You'd be just turning on the TV and it'd be 1-0 Blues like a minute into the game. So it'd be interesting to see if they do go with Fleury and the Blues can sort of channel that again, because that sounds like a bit of a recipe for disaster.
That is the one spot, or one of the spots, that I think kind of concerns me, is just, and Fleury has had no shortage of playoff experience. And so some of this too is hard to gauge with the fact that the playoff spot has already been clinched for the last week plus. So some of it could be that, but it seems to me that Talbot is just going to be the guy that's more able to kind of keep you in it early, maybe gives up goals a little later in the game. But I think the good start is way more important in the playoffs than it is in the regular season.
Yeah. I mean, especially in these low scoring games, a lot of times first goal is a lot of times win you a game, you know? or even worse, the second goal. You go up 2-0 or you tie it up 1-1. Those goals are huge for momentum. So yeah, it's gonna be a bloodbath this series. I'm fully confident in that.
Yeah, I can't wait. This is a series that we've known about for a long time. These two teams have basically been locked into these spots, and so we've had plenty of opportunities to just dive into every aspect of the fact that the Blues have just owned this rivalry over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that as the next question. I don't know what the record is over the last 3 seasons, but it's crazy. Like, it is like almost statistically impossible how poorly the Wild have done against the Blues, or I guess I could say it nicer, how well the Blues have done against the Wild. It is insane because I feel like it's never been like, oh, we own the Wild. I feel like every game over the last 2 seasons has been close. It just happens the Blues have got that edge. I mean, look at the game we played a week ago, that overtime insanity, craziness. But somehow the Blues won. I feel like a lot of the games have been like that, even though the record is so one-sided. Especially lately, I feel like it's been a lot closer than the record would indicate because Blues and Wild play a very, very similar game, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's why Bill Guerin made the moves for Jacob Middleton and Nick Delorier for one, was to try to be able to counter. Now, the Blues obviously have some top-end speed throughout the lineup, but it feels like a team that really tries to get you to kind of play to their style, and then when you get sucked down into that similar play style is when they just slam the foot on the gas and just leave you in the dust.
Yeah, I mean, the goal scoring has been unbelievable.
Yeah,
to say the least.
And so it feels very much like it's very similar to what's happened with Nashville this year and the last couple of years, where the Predators, they just get you to try to play their style of hockey, and when you get swept up into that is when they pounce because you're off balance, you're not really used to playing a particular way. And so it's not a Wild team that's built to play physical the entire game. But by having guys like Nick Delorier and Jacob Middleton and Brandon Duhaime, Marcus Foligno, Jordan Greenway, having those guys, you can play through it for stretches to get back to trying to beat teams up and down the ice with that transition game and trying to get the puck into the hands of Kirill Kaprizov as often as you feasibly can to try to pick up goals. So it feels like a move that Bill Guerin made directly to counter the styles of, say, the Blues, the Predators, and some of the other teams, the Flames, another good example. And so I feel like the Wild are better suited, and I think we saw that in the last couple of matchups, both overtime losses. The Wild are better suited to play that style than they were, say, for the Winter Classic,
right?
Where it ended up being it was 6-1 in the second period. Now, obviously, a lot of injuries for that game, but I get the sense that this series will be way more like the last two overtime loss matchups than it will be earlier in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting this series to go deep. That overtime game could have gone either way, and I think that is a perfect example of what this series is going to be like. There were so many different chances. Oh, Blues are going to win. Nope, Wild are going to win. No, the Blues are going to win. Oh my God, it's going to overtime. There was no point where I was like, I feel like you could probably agree with me on that. Is that there was no point where either fan base or either team looked comfortable at that. It really felt like they were kind of clawing their way to get goals, to play defense. It felt like it was very back and forth in terms of momentum. There wasn't a stretch where one team took control. It was so back and forth. It's gonna be chaos. I can't wait.
And that was the perfect word, actually, is because even watching it when the Blues went up in the most recent game, when they went up 4-1, I remember looking at the TV and I'm like, boy, this is not looking good. And then the next thing you know, it's 4-3, and all of a sudden then the Wild tie it up. And so I think that is one of the biggest differences for this Wild team, is that as in previous seasons where it feels like you have to expend a lot of energy to get to 3, even 4 goals, this year it feels like they can just do it in the blink of an eye. And they have, I can't even count the number of times that the Wild have come back from a 2-goal deficit in rapid succession. And
Sounds
so
like the Blues.
exactly, with all those top end guys, it just feels like a team that is never out of it, and that leads to some of those just crazy moments down the stretch, such as in that most recent game where the Wild were down a couple of goals, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, we're heading to OT.
That's funny. You could take what you just said verbatim, and that would pretty much be what Tommy and I talked about on the last episode of Locked On Blues. It's like, yeah, this is a team that's never out of it. They've erased deficits like that. Scored 7 goals in a period a few weeks ago. Scored like 5 goals in a period a few days ago. Like it's like you said, it definitely, there have definitely been times in the past where I felt like the Blues have had to work their butts off to get 3 goals. So now it's like they can do it without even breaking a sweat.
Yeah, it's gone from becoming kind of the exception to the rule to becoming what's expected on any given night. And so
Perfect way to describe it.
It's such an evenly balanced series, I think, that features, elite level, top end scoring, great defensemen, and a couple of teams with some goaltenders that are capable of taking games over completely. So to finish our crossover preview of the opening round between the Wild and the Blues, we'll talk about some of the X factors for both teams. We'll give you names that could impact the series entirely when we finish up our crossover episode of Locked on Wild and Locked on Blues after this. The month of May is here, which means that summer is right around the corner, which means you'll be more active, you'll be outside more, which means that you are going to need a go-to snack to take with you wherever your adventures lead. Built Bar is that go-to snack. They're both healthy and delicious, which means you don't have to sacrifice delicious food simply for the sake of your health. With Built Bar, you can have both, and it's super easy. All you have to do to get started is head to Built.com. All Built Bars and Puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate, which means that with Built Bar, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. Typically, Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. You can compare that to your standard candy bar with anywhere from 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. So if you want to get your summer happiness going, head to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Final segment of our playoff crossover episode of Locked on Wild and Locked on Blues. If you want the intel, every angle of this series, make sure to follow both Locked on Wild and Locked on Blues. We've got you on lock for every
I like that.
bit
That's
of
funny.
this series. Yeah,
That's a good one.
Little wordplay, but Josh, let's talk some of the X factors for this series. Give me 1 or 2 players for the Blues who could impact not only a couple of games, but could impact the entirety of the series.
I like that. You know what? I'm going to hit you with a little bit of wordplay myself. Tommy and I have this recurring segment that we do before every game. We name our locked on player of the game. See what I did there. And we actually have one of our listeners has been keeping like a tally of who wins, like Tommy versus me. We are within 1 point of one another at the end of the season in terms of our picks. So that's hilarious. But instead of giving you an X factor, I'm going to give you a couple locked on players of the series. First guy that jumps out to me, Jordan Kyrou. Absolutely dynamic through the first 45, 50 games. All-star, fastest skater winner. Looked like he was on pace to be in next franchise player for the St. Louis Blues. And then I don't know if he's been injured lately or just kind of lost step, but he hasn't quite had it. He's still been really good. He's still been putting up points, but in terms of that play that he had at the beginning of the season, we haven't seen that over the last few weeks or so from Jordan Kyrou. And as good as Robert Thomas has been, Jordan Kyrou is a guy that can create for himself like no other. He is so fast, so skilled, can turn nothing into something like nobody else. And if he's going, he can really be the catalyst for those games where the Blues aren't having offense, where he can just kind of pick a puck up behind his own net. Within 3 seconds, he's breaking away on the other end, putting the puck by your goalie. So if he can return to form, like I said, I don't know if he is dealing with an injury. Obviously, that'll be a little bit harder. But if it is like more of a confidence thing, I'd hope the start of a playoffs would be a good reset for him. Because if Jordan Kyrou is playing dynamic and like the way that he was when he earned himself an All-Star bid, he can be a difference maker in the series. Someone who moves the needle just far enough to come away with a victory. But obviously, other than that, the line of Robert Thomas, Vladimir Tarasenko, and Pavel Buchnevich has been my and Tommy, my co-host assertion, the best line in hockey over the last 20 or so games. They have been unbelievable. I think in the month of April, it's them at 1, 2, and 3 in terms of leading scorers in the NHL, respectively. At least it was a few days ago. It might have changed. But they have been unbelievable, impossible to stop. And in a series that I think is going to be extremely close, where every line is going to match up against one another really well, if that line can bring the dominance that they've shown in the regular season, it's going to be an absolute handful for the Wild to deal with, because they also got another line with Ryan O'Reilly on it and another line with Jordan Kyrou on it. So if you're going to have your hands full, if you're the Minnesota Wild defenseman.
Yeah, and we'll talk about one particular Wild defenseman who is going to be absolutely on. He's going to be on notice, or going to have to be for this series. But I'm going to hit you with a stat, and then I'm going to hit you with one of my X Factor players.
Do it.
Kirill Kaprizov this year against the Blues has 6 points in 3 games, 3 goals, 3 assists. And so that would maybe lead you to believe that Kirill Kaprizov is my X Factor. But looking back at what happened to the Wild against the Vegas Golden Knights, the Golden Knights shut the Kaprizov line down, shut him down. And the Wild did not have anybody that could provide that secondary scoring punch. And so my X Factor player for this series is Kevin Fiala.
Oh, he's been so good.
He has been on what I have referred to as an eliter for pretty much the entirety of the season. And so in a series, and like I said, I don't get the sense that we're going to see a lot of 1-0, 2-1 games. We could see a lot of like 4-3 type games.
Yep.
But I get the sense that both teams are going to be able to score in this series. And so Kirill will probably get his. But the thing that has made this Wild team so dangerous over the last 2 months of the season has been the fact that they've had the legitimate number 2 scoring line of Kevin Fiala, Freddie Gaudreau, and Matt Boldy. To when teams try to throw everything they have at Kirill Kaprizov, that Fiala line steps up and they can take over a game themselves. And so all eyes going to be on Kirill Kaprizov, and rightfully so. But Kevin Fiala, I think, could impact the series, because if he gets on one of those runs that he did it like a week ago, where he scored the game-winning goal by doing he pulled a move out of Kirill Kaprizov's book, skated around the entire team, set himself up in front of the net, and just top shelved it to win the game. He's capable of anything out there on the ice. And so Kevin Fiala is my X Factor player. Jonas Brodin, though, gonna need to be the Jonas Brodin that has shut Connor McDavid down every time they play the Oilers. Because, as you alluded to, so many scoring options for the Blues. The Wild are going to need to try to slow some of them down. And so if Jonas Brodin can do that, I think that gives the Wild a good chance to win this series. But it's going to be a tough one, because I haven't even discussed goaltending, power play, penalty kill, which I think I've talked about for like 9 consecutive shows because of how bad they have been at various points. So we're not even gonna get into the special teams, because the Wild
we'll
special
have time on another crossover.
That's a whole other show, is trying to get those figured out. So those are the X factors for both teams. Let's hammer out a prediction before we sit back and enjoy the entirety of this series. Josh, what are you thinking?
Oh, well, okay. Little bit of a fourth wall break. I know you said you're posting this on Monday, but as right now, we do not know who is going to have home ice advantage. I think that is going to be the difference maker. I think whatever team wins the series probably will do so on home ice because the Wild and Blues have both had a lot of success on home ice this season. That being said, as a safe bet, obviously I'm going to pick the Blues. I'm a little biased. I want to say Blues in 6.
Nope.
But I could see it go 7. I could totally see it go 7. Again, it really just depends on that home ice, you know? If Blues get home ice, they win the first 2 at home, or even, God forbid, lose the first 2 at home, it could be completely different. I think the series is going to go really far. I think that I mean, the Blues and the Wild, when they played and the Blues blew a 4-1 lead, I don't even want to say the Blues blew a 4-1 lead. The Wild just stormed back, you know? And every game is going to have that mentality. They've proven that no lead is safe. So yeah, it's gonna be back and forth the whole series. As a result, I'm expecting it to go 6 or 7, but gotta go with the Blues. That offense, unbeatable. You're getting 5 on your head every game.
I have a molten level take for this series.
If you say Wild in 4, I'm
No. Wild in 7.
Oh, okay.
5 of the games are going to overtime.
Oh, dude, no. You know how bad that would be for my sanity?
Yep, I'm right there with you, but I mean, the last 2 times these teams faced off, both OT games. Why not?
Oh my God.
It just makes sense. It just makes sense that this series would be decided by having to play extra hockey. And thank God no shootout in the playoffs. But
I think the Blues had like 4, 5 overtime games throughout the entirety of the year that they won the cup. And I remember every single one of those overtimes like vividly based on my stress levels and how much I was like, oh my God, like shaking back and forth. So if this series goes to 5 games, I don't know if I'm going to be around to do a series recap at the end.
Yeah, the Wild have been no shortage to overtime games with 10 overtime wins, 5 shootout wins. So I think they've played a total of 22 overtime games this year. And I get the sense that if the Wild are going to win this series, there's going to be a need to just kind of outlast the Blues, tire them out, and take advantage come overtime. So Wild in 7,
God.
5 overtime games.
Please no. I don't know if I might even rather Wild than 4 than that.
Ooh. Well, we'll see. All in all, it's going to be a fantastic series. And so if you are listening to this, make sure you do yourself a favor. Listen all weekend to Locked on Wild and Locked on Blues because we got a lot coming for you to gear up for this series. So make sure you're listening. Make sure your first listen is both shows every day. Make sure you follow and subscribe to both shows to get all the intel as we gear up for the best series coming in the NHL starting up next week. And you can hear new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network for both shows. We'll see you when the playoffs get going. Peace.